Well, I got up there to the Simply Alice Club, Alice Charmers Collectors Club. No, I don't have an Alice Charmers. Unfortunately, I probably never will because I missed the best deal there ever could have been. A couple of $100 for an Alice Charmers B, but the auction was an hour and a half plus away. It's like, I should have bought it. Should have been there. Probably could have brought it back home. I I fixed it because they needed it running for the auction. Brought it in an Empire tractor. I said I'd offer the guy 500. Said you can't. It's been listed. I guess it sold for somewhere between $200 and $300. Decent tires, ran good, clutch and everything worked good. Well, anyway. So we get up there, and what they wanted to do is that they had a WC tractor donated, but it was on steel. So nobody thinks the value of it's worth much. Well, to a purist, it's worth something, especially on that kind of steel. It's weird. It just has a center band that's about 3 inches wide, and then you put alternating cast iron blocks on there. The same style moved to a dozer grouser is called a swamp track. Yeah, true story. Because they're V shape, and when they hit the ground and go into soft ground, because they're wide, the more they penetrate, well, it's a larger surface area than even being flat. So you get the penetration and you get a larger surface area. They actually go in less than a flat with a grouser across. Well, anyway, on these, that's probably not it. It was easy to bolt the things on. I sat there and looked at it. The two front tires, they've been converted. They're not steel. They're rubber tire. I don't know what year this is. I'd have to go in and check. I'm speculating someplace in the late 30s. But they said the engine they'd done some engine work to it. They claim they overhauled the thing. Well, they surmise the head has been done. Nobody knows for sure. Now, on the other side of it, it had no magneto. They told them it ran, but we're trying to figure out how it ran without a magneto. Couldn't turn it over. Pulled the spark plugs out, sprayed blaster in there, and then gave it a real hard yank on the crank. Broke it loose. Got it turning. But when the pistons are at BDC, bottom dead center, and top dead center, because it's a four-banger, you have two up and two down, it tends to rock and move pretty easily because the piston doesn't move much. Now, get it turned so the crankshaft has, instead of pins top and bottom, they over here at the side, now the rod's at an angle, pistons are in the middle, and one pulls hard and the other pushes hard because one side's pulling against the side of the sleeve with a piston, and the other one's pushing. So it just got too hard. It didn't turn, so it's soaking in PB blaster. Well, in the meantime, I was monkeying with a magneto, and that's one of the reasons we kept trying to turn the thing. That was to get it timed. Well, I put it in the way it appeared to be that it was supposed to, but it was 90 degrees off. I'm like, what in the world? How do you get 90 off? And you say, well, just move. Well, it wasn't firing where it was supposed to, period. There's a number one. We never could get any fire on number one. It wouldn't clack when number one TDC lined up. So we fumbled around with it for a while because what I had done was you got as close to TDC as we could, a little wire through the hole and feel it going up and down and guesstimating. And then I marked the front. Oh, excuse me. And put a mark there so we'd have number one putting in the magneto. Well, we turn it, and when the white lines line up and maybe just a little past, we hear the clack. Well, I already know because of the alignment where the rotor was, came up to about here on this angle, coming up, but it comes up on the impulse, it stops, and then when the impulse gets all the way, it slings because it's trying to spin the magnets in there inside the field stator and run the magnetic field into the coil to make a spark. So that's why magnetos are so hot, is that when you turn it, whoosh, that thing's flying. Okay, quicker than you could turn it over, or even the starters can turn it over. So in this case, I got it. Oh, excuse me. So the impulse would release when it got to top dead center, or maybe even just a half of the line after, because I made a nice wide line on there, probably 3/16 of an inch. And I told them either half the line to a full line offset, in other words, either half or a full off, would be safer for hand starting. But it had to be top dead center or slightly after. But we got it there and I got it sparking, mounted it on the tractor, wouldn't work. So I had to pull the drive out, and they had a manual there, and checked the manual. There's nothing that was going to happen when I pulled that all out. So I pulled it out and then read the book because I couldn't find any marks. What did they say to do? Well, it's at top dead center in the crankshaft. We already know by compression and piston position it's top dead center. So we turned the magneto to top dead center. How did he do that? Well, the impulse stopped it here. The rotor needed to be, okay, let's just say it this way. The impulse stopped it here. Here's the engine block. And it needed to be here to line up. So what did we do? You turn it through, clack, and then move it backwards to line it up. So what do you mean? Well, once the mechanism is released, now it's free flying. So you bring it back and up to number 1, alignment. So what did that do? Put it in that way, turned it, lined up the gear when I put it in. Because the magneto's into the gear adapter assembly, which also has the governor. Slide them into the hole with the rotor lined up, snap through, and brought it back until it lined up. There's a nub actually on the case on the inside. Lined it up with a nub, put the thing in there, wiggle, snap, lined it up again with that nub, locked it up. Then we brought it around by hand. It's already released 1, so we went 3, 1, 3, 4, 2, and then came back up to number 1, and the line would come up, snap. You got it. And we knew it was number 1. Checked it afterwards because it'll snap through, and then it has to be near, and it was near where it was supposed to be. So we had it. Worked out pretty good. But we couldn't turn it fast enough so that the thing could pick up gas out of the carburetor to start. We could turn it. We could make spark, but you need to be able to move it fast enough for the piston to move down, each piston, to draw air and fuel in the carburetor to get it in the cylinder. The cure for this is unfortunately only 2 things. Tow it around the yard, which they were reluctant to do because of the rain. And the other one was, well, you got to hook up either a heavy-duty industrial drill or a motor of some sort that's, half horse or better. Mount the motor on the side, run the belt around the crankshaft and the motor, hold it tight and fire it up. Let the motor do the turning. It's the only thing you got. You might have to start it with the crankshaft. Start the movement with a crankshaft to get it to an even spot where the pistons are either top dead center or bottom dead center, so it has about 30 to 45 degree of a swing, and if it moves quick enough in that time, it'll go through and spin that rascal around. Just keep pouring blaster in there. Then once you get it freed up like we did that John Deere, it'll be in pretty good shape. I prefer the motor deal because the drill on the crankshaft, see, this is different than other units. Allis Charmers on the WCs, WDs, WD-45s ran it through the front casting, a bar with a spring. The spring's to keep it back out of the way. So you put the hand crank on the end of that shaft. There's a little roll pin here and a roll pin here. Put the bar on, push it through to engage the front pulley that has a release mechanism in it, as well as 2 flat edges to grab. And when the engine fires, the release mechanism is a ramp. And it hits that roll pin and pushes it back so it doesn't take you for a ride. And the deal was, if you take the crank off the end of the cranking shaft, you'd be able to put a drill on there and push it in, big old heavy thing, fire it up and turn it. So nobody has an industrial drill like that. I don't think mine's big enough. I got a nice big 1-horse, I think it is. I used to hone cylinders with it. Plenty of power, but I don't know if it's plenty of power for this job. Edgar Handy used to have one, I think it was a 3/4 inch drill. And that worked very well for a lot of stuff, but let me tell you, whoa, we used to have to block it and hold it tight. It'd usually take 2 people. And we check over under units and hydropowers with it. Yeah, out of the Olivers and the Whites, you could test them, but you had to hang on tight because that startup was rough. Once it got started, easy as pie, spin right around, go through the shifts, and hang on tight each shift, but it worked good. You start out in low, shift to direct, and then go into overdrive. But each change of speed means it's torquing again. So it's speeding the output shaft and anything connected with it faster. So I need to do something similar to that, but I got a feeling they're going to end up towing it. But I got the mag in there, and that was a big deal. But nobody else really wanted to do anything else with the engine all day long. They claimed there was oil in it. They should have pulled the valve cover and made sure the valves were free. That's another one. So, but that's something. Next month, I think June 8th, I think they're talking, Saturday. I got to see when the newsletter comes out or the email. I might sneak back up there to see if I can get it going just because I've started the project, but we'll see. It's not all that complicated, just certain things have to be done. The problem with the valves is if a intake valve sticks open, then when the piston comes up on compression, it blows back through, and it does one of two things. It either screws up, there's no vacuum to bring the gas up through, or the other one is it blows back through the carburetor, and when it does that, it goes through the venturi and picks up some gas, and then you draw it back through, and you take in a double charge of gas, and it tends to make them flood. But most often, it's just an open spot. Piston comes up, blows air back through, so the other one, essentially, one's drawing, one's pushing, and they feed each other back and forth, and nothing happens. So that was something I'll have to go through too. It's I don't know. It's one of the things they got themselves into a little bit too deep, too quick. But hey, we're with the program. Go with it now. You know, if we're behind it, somebody else comes to look at it, and we're confident in the unit running, we can show how good it works, or starts at least. It can tow something. Tow a Swisher anyway. No PTO, no hydraulics, but it does have a lift, a mechanical lift. Well, a worm gear lift. There'd be a worm on the shaft from the engine to the back end of the transmission. So with a worm there in the front end of the transmission, I think it has its own oil box. That basically what you're doing is picking the sector gear up and down to make the thing. But it might have a shift collar. I have to look it over. But that's a lift, and when it gets to a certain point, the cam pops up and trips the gears apart. And then a lock mechanism kicks in place. So it's a working system, but it's something that's definitely beyond old school. Oldest school. They missed the boat of 1939, that's for sure. But Allis built a lot of good tractors otherwise, so, you know, that's why the club's there. I worked on a lot of Allises, never owned one. Like I said, I could have owned a B. That would have been beautiful in the woods. But I need the TO20. Let's see if I can get that going. And hopefully this next winter I'll be able to do more in my VAC. I did a fair amount late, but I need to finish the block. Sandblast the sleeves, get them rust cleaned off of those, and get the sleeves installed. And that's going to take some filing to get the dimensions right, but I think I can get her in. And that'll be good to get that engine assembled and running. That's what would be nice. Even if I don't get it in a tractor, to have a running VAC motor. So, well, anyway, I got to get myself to bed. But that was the deal today. I was away for 10 hours, and boy, the boys missed me when I came up and started messing with the window filler for the air conditioner on the front porch. I just run my finger across it and rattle it like a washboard. Sid's in there just a whining because he knows who it is. That was funny. Ay, 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 ay. My boys missed me. Yeah, Debbie kind of did too, but she was reading book. We both have similar problems. Our hands and arms have been hurting. So, but time for me to get to bed tonight. What time is it now? We're in, what, 15 minutes in? And it's about 11:15. I've been up because I can't get back to sleep and had other trouble from traveling day. Anyway, I'm going to get myself going. Tomorrow will be a day to kind of get things back to normal. Got to move the tools back into the Taurus X. So Toyota was almost flawless all day. I got to put gas in that tomorrow. So that day, tomorrow's pretty well shot. The morning's going to be rain anyway, the way it looks. Not 100%, because today was supposed to be 100% rain, right? Or somewhere between 80 and 100%. And I looked at it, I saw 100% down here, and the start of the day was supposed to be 100% up there. Nope. Shortly afternoon, nice cloudy day with some sun. Partly cloudy, partly sunny, depending on how you want to look at it. Drove home in sunshine. Yeah, these are the idiots telling us that global warming is going to kill us all. They can't even tell you the weather 6 hours in advance. But they know what's happening 100, 150, 200 years from now. They have no clue. We have ice cores. You do, and the ice cores tell you exactly the opposite of what you're telling us. So take your pseudoscience and shove it up your whatever. It's just crazy. One thing I should have done today that I didn't, because we're too busy trying to fix things and make them work right. I had a borescope there with my phone. I should have popped that out and looked in the cylinders, but maybe I can do that next month. So I have two borescopes, a cheap one and a better one. So maybe the better one uses the cell phone. Better resolution. Then it works good until you dunk the tip in oil. I don't know what to say about that one, but we learned a lot, even with it messed up. Okay, it's time for me just to get to bed. You folks be good and have a good night. I have to go up and push dogs out of my side of the bed, maybe. Oh, no, I'm not done yet. I talked about the magneto up there, but 17, almost 18 minutes in, let me get to the real deal. The magneto was one with I should have looked at the name. I'm not all that familiar with Fairbanks Morrison. What's the other one? Phelan, and then there's a third one. But it just has an end cap with a brass rod that pokes all the way down in there and touches the tab on the coil. Well, I pulled that out and saw the rotor, so I had to pull the top off. And I said, I set things to mark them where they were. So the one, I turned the slotted end where the impulse is and brought it up against the impulse. Stopped it. And the other end, I put a little scratch mark where the rotor was aiming. Pulled the cap off. Took a look. It had an A and a C mark on the gear drive. Your impulse goes through the coil with the magnets and all of that. So drive tanks, impulse, shaft into magnets, and then up to a little pinion gear, just a little booger. One tooth has a chamfer on the side of it. Well, the other one is a larger gear, 2-to-1 for the rotor. So this shaft will turn 2 times to go all the way around, so it's not sparking twice with a magneto, once for each cylinder on time. Well, I took it apart. When I pulled it off, I saw the A and the C. What are they for? And I was like, oh, no, I got to read the book. But then I looked and I saw a sticker. The A is anti-clockwise. We call it counterclockwise. But rather than 2 letters, they put 1 in there right over top of the space between the gear teeth. That's supposed to match with that one chamfered gear tooth on the pinion. And the C also, a few teeth later, just I think 3-4 teeth apart, has just a single C, clockwise. Anti-clockwise, clockwise. And on a circle this size, they were just about that far apart. Interesting. That's not where they were when I pulled it apart. Apparently, they put the gear and drive and everything in there one way, and they kept moving the gears to get the rotor where they wanted it, rather than changing the gear and hub assembly that went in the accessory drive, so to speak, and governor drive. So I pulled it out, lined it all up, and stuck it in where it belongs. Now, another one is I cleaned the points when I had the end cap off, rotor down inside. The next large cap you take off has the gear drive in there, and the coil behind it. But it's exposed right there. Now I cleaned the points because they're in there. Points, condenser, coil, big cover, 4 screws. The top cover, the little bitty one with the brass rod, has 2 screws in it. So when I had everything apart and I saw the A, the C, and I found that tooth, when I went to put it back together, I was trying to figure out how in the world I was going to do this. Well, I lined up the rotor, and when I put the magneto up, I set it up on the bench, but turned it on its back, or on the drive end, so to speak, made sure it was up against the stop, but it didn't have to be in this case. What was I doing? I was taking that one little tooth with a chamfer on it and bringing the C down, because what had happened is on the drive end, it's clockwise. Since, well, it's usually the drive end they're going to talk about. When I turned to the drive, brought it up against the stop for the impulse, I looked and there was a little arrow up there, and it was aiming for the arrow. It's like, okay. Then I saw where the doodad was, the chamfer tooth. Okay. Was able to line the C up as I brought it up, because I was looking down over the coil. I had this thing stopped, and that brought it right up there, lined the two together. Now, the other thing is when you clean the points, before you get done with them, you always want to take a piece of good paper or cardboard, open the points up, stick them in there, slide it back and forth. Paper's going to tear unless you take off some of the pressure and hold it, but move it back and forth to clean the grime off. I use business cards. They tend to work pretty well. And on almost, not all, but almost all magnetos, the gap is 15 thousandths. Everything, top to bottom, unless you're working with a small engine, then it's 20. And the International Magneto looks almost identical to their distributor engines. So what do you do there? It's a Magneto, but they want 20 thousandths because it's an international distributor that wants 20 thousandths. So set it at 20. But if you set it at 15, you're going to retard your other cylinders. If you set your timing right for number 1, you retarded your other cylinders because there's not enough dwell. It goes further before it opens the points. If you have a big gap of the points, when it comes up and hits here with a big gap, it's going to... But if you have a small gap, it's going to hit further before it actually opens it up because the points are closer together, which means the stationary point moved up. You say, oh, it's not much. Figure it this way, I found out over the years, 3 degrees per thousandth. That's right, 3 degrees of timing for 0.001 thousandths of feeler gauge, the point gap that you change, plus or minus, either way. You want to mess with that? Put it in right. So, is it going to make a huge difference? Probably, especially if your hand's starting. But it'll make a difference on your other cylinders, what time they fire in before top dead center. It is that much of a difference. It's worth it. Get it right. What else? Well, the impulse, there, and it's funny because the small shaft has the cam operating the points on it with a small pinion. Well, it only has 2 lumps, 2 cam lobes. Well, it's because it's turning twice with the crankshaft. That's correct. But the larger gear is hooked to the rotor, so it turns at half speed. So this one down here is turning twice speed, and it's lining up with 2 cylinders. Click, clack. True story. 1, 3, 4, 2. And that's how it does it. So now you have an idea with the magneto. The impulse is just something that comes up, it stops, and it's spring-loaded. And when it gets to a certain point, it releases the mechanism and continues on to the next stop. But there again, it only has to have 2 stops. But anyway, I figured I'd go with that because we're talking tech here. What else? There was nothing else that was really tech on that. We went to drain the carburetor. We had to take the main jet out. Fortunately for this one, it's a full main jet. Where the T-screw, the grommet cap on there, plus the main body, all was able to come right out nice and clean. So I think still is seated in the carburetor, but I'm not 100% certain. But it made life easier. Oh, excuse me. Told him to drain the thing out, and he did a lot of draining. And he was kind of impressed how much crap he had to drain out of that tank, which is just old fuel. The drive up and the drive back were pretty much uneventful. Both trips I had one complete young stupid maniac going up, and I had, I think, an old fart coming down. The one going up was insane. Just something's wrong with them. They should never drive again. The other one, why? Well, because the thing kept speeding up as I went to pass it. I mean, I had like a 10-mile-an-hour overtake. 10-mile-an-hour overtake again. And I was running well below 75. Buzzing along, minding my own business. And she kept doing it. Well, then something came up where a car pulled out, and for some reason she had to come out behind it as it went to pass a truck, and they both slowed down because one in front of them was running too slow, and the truck was catching that, but it was in the passing lane. So suddenly I have to slow down, and she's pumping the brakes and then pumping the brakes and was screwing around quite a bit. Well, then everything freed up, got past the 18-wheeler, and then I just kind of stayed in the lane behind her and let everything, you could see her start to wobble, so she wasn't paying attention. So I got in the normal lane, shot by her, went up and around the truck and the whole 9 yards. She had no clue what she was doing, was what it looked like, but we've run into this before where somebody walks up beside us, blocks us from coming into a lane, somehow knows we're coming into that lane. I never figured that one out. And then got in front of us. Literally, I got in front of them, pulled into the lane, clear, no problem, was no screwing around with them. And they went out and around and came in front and started brake checking. As I said, oh, look at this. Debbie says, what? They're coming around. You watch. They're going to drop right in front of us and brake check us. Why would they do that? Because they're bored little idiots. I said, they can't protest anymore, so they got to do something else for their thrills. And then they kept doing it and doing it and doing it, but I already had my foot on the brake, so for me, I was just pulling up, stopping, letting them roar off a little bit, and then doing it all over again. It just kept going 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Debbie says, this is frustrating. I said, yeah, it's frustrating too, but I'm waiting. She says, for what? They're going to screw up. I said, as you can see here, I'm pretty much ready for it. She said, yeah. So I know what's in front of us. They should lose their license and walk everywhere they go. She laughed and waited, and then finally they did something stupid and no accident, but they kind of had to get out of the lane and go. I had one of those idiots here, stupid little young'un, left, right, left, and speed up, slow down. No, you can't pass me. Now I'm down to 55 or 60 miles an hour, so I blow by her at 65 plus without a problem, and then speeds up again, and you just keep going until they're bored. Make sure you're doing your defensive driving. Nothing else you could do, really. What you can do, call the cops on the road and they'll yell at you for using your cell phone while you're driving? Please. The innocent citizens are the ones that they're constantly threatening. Why? Because they can get close enough to them without getting hurt. They don't have to put any effort in to arrest us for nothing. True story. Anyway, time for me to go. Taught you a little bit about the magneto, 15,000 scap, and all of your basic and old-time magnetos, all of them. And if it's off, it'll retard the other cylinders, and then later on, just reset. Oh, excuse me. If it's a mistake, well, reset the points for 20. That's not hard. It's more miserable, yes, because you have to pull the things off and realign the gears when you put it back on. But still, it's not a horrendous deal. Just do it. And then each time you make an adjustment, check it. Pull out the timing light. Watch the marks. Make sure you got some decent TDC marks. Turn the thing over and listen to when the mag snaps. That's how I adjusted the Johnny. I actually advanced it a ways so that it would pop towards top dead center. Starts pretty good because of that. So, maintenance. It's an awful thing. All right, time for me to go now for sure. See ya.